So back to economics and economic growth. There is a generally held belief by much of the world and by many highly educated people that economic growth is always going to be good. There is a very focused obsession with economic growth and the idea that economic growth will solve all of the ills of the world. But we need to ask the question, what is it we are meant to be growing into? Is there any point that we are targeting, and once we reach that, we plateau off, and having reached this ideal situation, everything is going to be much better? Or are economists very much just like this Jack and the Beanstalk story or something like along those lines? I mean, if you had a farmer who planted a seed or seeds, and as the plants grew, he watered them and fertilized them and tended to them, and you ask him, what is the objective? And he said, oh, it's just to make the plants grow. And then you ask them, but when they grow, then what will become of them? Oh, I will just keep fertilizing and watering and tending them, and I'll let them grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. You would think that there was something a little bit wrong with this person, that he's really got a problem. And yet, this is the proposition being handed to us by highly educated individuals. There is no goal in sight. We are expected to believe that endless economic growth is both possible and desirable. In the modern times, if we see any slowdown of economic growth, then everybody feels very threatened by this. We see it as a great threatening thing. And then all types of things must be done to stimulate consumer confidence by any means at our disposal in order to kickstart once again the economy. When you ask, can there be bad growth, you would be considered uneducated or not very intelligent. But the reality is that bad growth is not only possible, it is something that is regularly occurring within the world. If you look at any city in the world today and compare it to how things were 50 years ago, and we're talking about in the more developed countries, and you ask the question, have the cities become better places to live in? The answer, of course, is no, they have not. So we will look a little bit more deeply into some of these elements of economics and the role it plays in our life. But I'd like to just raise this quote is by a British economist and social philosopher, E.F. Schumacher. He made this rather cutting analysis, comparing modern economists to medieval theologians who used dogma and blind acceptance in an attempt to address complex realities and demand faithful and unquestioning acceptance of their position from all of us. He states, If the economist fails to study meta-economics, or even worse, if he remains unaware of the fact that there are boundaries to the applicability of the economic calculus, he is likely to fall into a similar kind of error to that of certain medieval theologians who tried to settle questions of physics by means of biblical quotations. Every science is beneficial within its proper limits, but becomes evil and destructive as soon as it transgresses them. For example, having established by his purely quantitative methods that the gross national product of a country has risen by, say, 5%, the economist turned econometrician is unwilling and generally unable to face the question of whether this is to be taken as a good thing or a bad thing. He would lose all of his certainties if he even entertained such a question. Growth of GNP must be seen as a good thing, irrespective of what has grown and who, if anyone, has benefited. The idea that there could be pathological growth, unhealthy growth, disruptive or destructive growth is to him a perverse idea which must not be allowed to surface. In my lifetime, I have seen some extraordinary developments. When I was much younger, still a child, I would frequently hear conversations of my father and his friends, others, about the idea of the day was that the introduction of technology into the workplace was going to result in two things: increased productivity of the individual and the business enterprise, which would result in a greater capacity to earn money. There would be a great rising in wages. And because more work was done in a much shorter time, people would have more leisure time to utilize and to spend this new earned money in. And of course, that notion, which was the big driver, never came to be. We saw that as technology was introduced into the workplace, people now became required to do more. For example, I can remember as a child that we would see in accounting departments, you would have 10, 15, 20 people sitting there with yellow columnar paper and pencils working on these spreadsheets. With the introduction of computers, we've had the work of 10 or 15 people replaced by one person on a computer. And the fact that that one person is now much more productive than one person previously, this new pressure has become a norm. And what the expectation is that we must find even more efficient ways to work where individuals are capable of doing even much more. The result has not been a massive increase in relative earning, nor has there been any increase in the amount of leisure that a person has had. We see that the overall work environment has become much more demanding than it was in earlier times. Unfortunately, work is no longer seen as ennobling. It is simply a part of an economic formula. When this happens, it causes a sense of alienation where people work solely for the purpose of earning money and no longer feel deeply connected to their work and see that the work actually enriches their lives. And now, looking ahead, we're seeing that there is going to be this amazing displacement of workers because of robotics. The effects that this is going to have on the world is actually unimaginable to us. It's going to have a profound effect on the ability of governments to collect taxation. Robots are not paid money, and so you lose a massive base of income tax payers. You're seeing that because of this new displacement that will be caused by this automation, that many leaders in the world are promoting this idea of minimum incomes, where everybody should be guaranteed some form of minimum income, regardless of whether they're working or not. For me, this idea I feel to be very inhumane, very cruel. It is a debasement of humanity. And it's all for what? Why are we even thinking of going there? Well, it is generally because of the demands to generate profit. So as it was in the past, where you had a ruling class and the general population were serfs who served some masters, this proposition of guaranteed minimum incomes, to me, will simply make a new class of serfs who will be serving a new overlord class by spending the money that they are getting on the goods and services being manufactured by these overlords. These overlords are not political leaders, but they are technology and economic lords. So this raises, when we consider some of these things, it raises the point of what is the purpose of the economy? Is it not that the economy is meant to serve the interests of the people? Is it not meant to ennoble and enrich our life? But what we are seeing, increasingly so, is that it is the responsibility of the individuals to serve the economy. So, in closing, I would just like to point out that we exist in a world which is experiencing a clash of ideas. This clash results in clear symptoms of profound and serious malaise. My intention is to shine a light on the subject by questioning its very foundation. And I hope that you will join me for the continuation of this series.